Bank of England has held its key interest rate at 5.25%, but said monetary policy is likely to need stay tight for an extended period of time. The Monetary Policy Committee voted 6-3 in favor of keeping the main bank rate at 5.25%, with 3 members preferring another 25 basis point hike to 5.5%. The bank had already kept its rate steady at the central bank's previous monetary policy meeting in September, snapping a streak of 14 hikes in a row.
Well, thank you, Katie, and let me add my welcome and say thank you for coming in the storm today. So inflation is falling, and we expect it to keep falling this year and next. Our increases in interest rates are working to bring inflation back to the 2% target. So today we have voted to maintain bank rate at 5.25%. Monetary policy remains restrictive. Let me be clear. There is absolutely no room for complacency. Inflation is still too high. We will keep interest rates high enough for long enough to make sure we get inflation all the way back to the 2% target. We will be watching closely to see if further increases in interest rates are needed. But even if they are not needed, it is much too early to be thinking about rate cuts. I'm first going to talk about inflation over the coming months, and then I will turn to the outlook for the economy and inflation further ahead, and what that means for monetary policy. So to start with the near-term outlook for inflation. Chart 1, which has just come up from today's report, shows consumer price inflation and its components since 2019. It shows how inflation has continued to fall since our previous report in August. Much as we expected, inflation took a step down in the data for July, published 2 weeks after the August report. And as you can see in our near-term projection, shown in the shaded area, we expect inflation to take another, larger step down in October's data, when it is published in 2 weeks' time. From 6.7% in September, we think it will probably fall to just below 5%. And we then expect it to remain around that level for the rest of the year. The dark orange bars in this chart show that this fall is driven in large part by energy prices, but gradually falling inflation for food and other goods will help too, as shown by the narrowing purple and blue bars. Ofgem's price cap means that we can be confident about the contribution from household energy bills to lower inflation over the coming months. But any projection is uncertain. There are upside risks to inflation from energy prices following the tragic events in the Middle East. And there remains uncertainty about the time it will take other non-energy components of inflation to come down as well. Chart 2 shows the evolution of our near-term inflation projections and compares them with the outturns in the data. The blue line is actual inflation. The stalks are our near-term forecasts from successive monetary policy reports in different colours from November last year. As you can see, the data have come in broadly in line with our near-term projections over the last year. But in the past few months, inflation outturns have come in somewhat lower than we had expected. And we now project inflation to be a little lower over the remainder of the year than we did in August. Most of the downside news since August reflects lower core goods price inflation. The food inflation has also come down a little faster than we expected. While services inflation is also slightly lower than we expected in August, it remains elevated, and it now contributes more to overall inflation than the prices of energy, food, and other goods. It's important that services inflation falls steadily over the next year. And to achieve that, we need to see an easing of underlying cost pressures in the UK economy. So this brings me on to the medium-term outlook. In the face of the series of significant economic shocks that have hit us in recent years, overall demand in the economy has proved resilient, supported by a very tight labour market. But there are increasing signs that higher interest rates are weighing on economic activity, and we see that in weaker official activity data and in a range of business surveys. Now, as we describe in some detail in today's report, the Monetary Policy Committee always takes a collective steer from a wide range of indicators to inform its view of labour market developments. And the overall message from these indicators is that, while it remains tight in an historical context, the labour market has loosened, and by a little more than projected in August. Chart 3 shows how most indicators of employment growth are now easing. This includes the Purchasing Managers' Index for composite employment intentions, which is in light blue, and the Permanent Staff Placement Index, which is in dark orange. The official measure, which is in purple, has also weakened. But this last series can be volatile, and there are increased uncertainties around it following the suspension of the labour force survey by the ONS. Now, to inform the MPC's assessment, bank staff feed all of these indicators into a model to estimate a measure of underlying employment growth. This is a long-standing practice, but the challenges with the official data reaffirm the importance of taking such steers from quite a wide range of data sources. Now, the model-based estimate is shown in chart 4 in blue, along with the official data in orange. As you can see, the estimated measure for employment growth has gradually slowed since 2021, cutting through the volatility in the official data. The indicator-based model suggests that employment will be broadly flat over the second half of this year. There are other signs that the labour market is loosening. The number of vacancies has fallen and unemployment has ticked up. Now, despite this softening in the labour market, nominal wage growth remains much higher than would be consistent with the inflation target, if sustained at these rates. The ONS measure of annual growth in regular average weekly earnings in the private sector was 8.0% in August, higher than expected. The continued strength in wage growth has persuaded the MPC to raise slightly its assessment of the medium-term equilibrium rate of unemployment, and also its estimate of persistence in wage and price inflation. In effect, the MPC judges that the weakening in the labour market has been driven in part by a lower supply of labour, not just demand. This would help to explain the continued strength in pay growth, even as employment growth has eased. While all measures of current pay growth remain elevated, the recent pickup in the official measure of private sector wages has not been matched by other indicators. This is illustrated in chart 5. The bank's decision-maker panel in yellow, HMRC payroll data in dark orange, and the Indeed wage tracker in purple all point to wage growth close to 7%, which is below the official data, which are in blue. And the bank's agents continue to report that average annual pay settlements have been in the region of 6 to 6.5%. That is why, when assessing the evidence of inflation persistence, the MPC will continue to monitor all available data on pay growth very carefully. Weaker demand and a softer labour market are signs that monetary policy is restrictive. The effects of higher interest rates continue to weigh on economic activity throughout the forecast we have presented today. Chart 6 shows the MPC's projection for growth in the UK economy, conditional on market interest rates. GDP is projected to remain broadly flat through 2024. Growth then recovers over the second half of the forecast period. It remains below historical averages, however, reflecting both restrictive monetary policy and subdued potential supply growth. On balance, the margin of excess demand has diminished over recent quarters, and we expect an increasing degree of economic slack to emerge from the start of next year. This will help to reduce inflation pressures in the UK economy, alongside declining external cost pressures. Chart 7 shows the implications for consumer price inflation. In the MPC's central projection, which is conditional on the market path for interest rates, inflation is more likely to end the forecast below the 2% target than above it, albeit only slightly. In the modal or most likely case, inflation is 1.9% in 2 years' time and ends the forecast at 1.5% in the fourth quarter of 2026. The committee continues to judge, however, that risks around that central case are skewed towards higher inflation. Adjusting the modal projection for the balance of risk, the mean or expected path for inflation is just above the 2% target in 2 years' time.